An escalation trap occurs when an attacker uses mostly air power to strike targets and is tactically successful. The bombs hit targets. In this case, bombs killed leaders, destroyed missile launchers, but the attacker becomes strategically weaker. And the reason is because air power alone rarely is going to achieve these major objectives. So the escalation trap, it doesn't only happen with air power, but sometimes I call it the smart bomb trap, because the illusion of control that comes with smart bombs, we have PowerPoint presentations, people in uniform with stars, and it is true that the bombs will hit within 95% of the time within 3 feet or less of the target. You can actually hit a chair with our precision bombs. That creates an illusion of not just tactical success, but strategic success. The problem is that's the trap. That's the trap. And we fell into the trap. Other American presidents have fallen into this trap. Other countries, Putin has fallen into the trap. But the trap we're in now with Iran, this is probably the most wicked escalation trap for America in history.
Everyone thinks wars are won by the first successful strike. But what if that's exactly where the biggest mistake begins? One of America's leading military strategists believes the United States has entered what he calls an escalation trap, a conflict where every tactical victory creates an even bigger strategic problem. He argues this isn't just another Middle East war. In his view, it's a turning point that could reshape global power, disrupt the world economy, and redefine America's role on the world stage. In this interview, Professor Robert Pape explains why he believes the greatest danger isn't the next missile strike. It's the chain reaction that follows. Let's begin.
Because every month that this war has proceeded, you have seen President Trump has tried a new tactical strategy. First, it was leadership bombing. That didn't collapse the regime in Iran. Then it was shifting over to 6 weeks of a bombing campaign against mostly military targets. These are the launcher. This was the launcher campaign. And it did. We did score some success. We were not quite as tactically successful as some might have thought, but nonetheless, we did knock out a fair portion of Iran's missiles and missile launchers. And then we shifted over to, but that didn't lead to success. Iran did not buckle there either. And then we shifted over to the U.S. blockade, which again was tactically successful. We could stop ships. We could even attack ships. But it produced not just strategic failure, but strategic weakness. Now, what's the key weakness in all of these points? It is Iran taking Hormuz. In every single, what happened in this war is within the first few days, Iran lashed back, and with its drones, it also used mines, it effectively seized control of Hormuz. And this was fully predictable, Cyrus. So 3 days before the first bombs fell on the Escalation Trap Substack, I published the very first post called The Smart Bomb Trap. And this piece is the product of 20 years of modeling the bombing of Iran. I do this every year in my class called Strategy. That's the nickname for it at the University of Chicago. I end that class in the spring with a 90-minute simulation of what would happen if we bombed Iran, the nuclear sites, et cetera, et cetera. And I've been doing that for over 20 years. And so the stages I lay out, stage one, the bombs would be tactically successful. Stage two, Iran would lash back, seize Hormuz. Stage three, we would be caught in a ground power dilemma where we are going to face a choice. Either we concede and Iran becomes truly a regional hegemon. It's not just a matter of ending a war with Hormuz, Iran has an enormous capacity now to become far more powerful than it ever has been in its modern history. And this will really change the dynamics of world politics. Or we either accept that outcome, or we have to fight to take it back. Iran's not just going to give it up, and they're not just going to sue for peace, because what's occurring here is a shift in the balance of power. That's what it means to become strategically weaker, and that's why Iran is just not going to give this up. So that was the prediction 3 days before the bombs fell, and then the bombs fell, and literally everything happened.
Professor Pape explains why he believes this conflict followed a predictable pattern. His argument is that tactical victories created larger strategic problems, ultimately leading to a situation where each new military move produced even greater risks instead of ending the conflict.
This isn't just another Iraq. It's not another Afghanistan. It's not even another Vietnam. This escalation trap is worse and will have more devastating consequences than any that I think we have seen in American history. And the real issue here is, as I've been explaining in my writings, is that the 2026 Iran war is the inverse of the 1991 Gulf War. So when the Cold War ended in 1991, the Soviet Union receded as a major player in international politics for quite some time, and of course collapsed and then became Russia. But it wasn't just the end of a Cold War. Immediately thereafter, in 1990, Saddam Hussein seized Kuwait and Iraq. He led Iraq, and Iraq had the fourth largest army in the world, 1 million troops in arms, and he took about half of those and invaded Kuwait. That's 42 divisions. They had just come out of the Iran-Iraq war for 8 years, so these are battle-hardened divisions. And it was not just taking Kuwait, but Saddam Hussein put his forces right up on the Kuwaiti border with Saudi Arabia, essentially threatening to take parts of Saudi Arabia. In other words, that would unify all the oil in Iraq, all the oil in Kuwait, and the oil in Saudi Arabia. That is that dreaded oil hegemon, and Iraq would control 22% or so of the world's oil. And notice that's almost identical to what Iran has effectively done. But back in 1990, the United States waged a war. It starts in January 1991, and in 43 days, a 39-day air war, a 4-day ground war, the United States kicked Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, the most stunning victory that America had perhaps ever. It was really an amazingly stunning victory. And to give you some sense of that, we brought 10,000 body bags with us to fight that war. And how many died? 147. Now, we don't want anybody to die, but my goodness, we didn't realize how powerful we were, because what happened in that war was America rolled out this precision technology, which had not really been on display before. This was the shock and awe campaign, the stealth fighters, satellite technology, GPS. This was all new. And it was the precision revolution. Write a lot about this in my book, Bombing to Win. And I was teaching for the U.S. Air Force right at this time. So this was a stunning victory.
Pape compares today's conflict with the 1991 Gulf War, arguing that America's overwhelming military success then helped establish decades of U.S. global influence. He uses that historical contrast to explain why he believes the current conflict represents a very different strategic environment.
What's happened in 2026 with the Iran war is the inverse of all that. The new rules of power are America can be beaten. It's not America that has escalation dominance. It's Iran that has escalation dominance. It's not America that has the precision revolution and just the this high-end military complex. Iran has precision power now, and it's cheap, and it can be produced en masse, and it can be produced in greater mass than America's very expensive boutique interceptors. So what is, and then the consequences are tremendous for the United States, for the world, because of the cost of the shock to the world economy, which is only beginning. It hasn't even fully hit yet. This is the opposite of the 91 Gulf War. This is the war that is going to define the decline of American hegemony, not the rise of American preeminence. And it's creating power vacuums already. So Trump in the last week has tacoed again, right? So he made a bunch of threats and then he pulled back. And this is the fifth time, by my count, at least 5 times that I can document this precisely. And maybe there's a few more. But what has happened with those tacos is these are strategic paralysis by the United States. We are in the escalation trap. Trump is fumbling between a dilemma. He's on the horns of a dilemma. There's no good way out for him. But that paralysis is not for the United States, doesn't mean paralysis for Iran and other actors in the region. They are not paralyzed. They're going forward to gain power, try to gain more influence, because as America's power declines, it creates power vacuum. Power vacuum. And guess what? Power vacuums don't like to stay vacuums. Power rivalries come in to fill the vacuums, and that's what you're seeing. That's why Iran is exerting itself to gain leverage. It's initiating attacks. That's why it's you see now Iran's proxies, the Houthis, for example, doing similar things, similar attacks with Saudi Arabia. And then you see Saudi Arabia initiating some attacks. What you are seeing is a classic situation of a spiral. This is the spiral phase of the escalation trap. Cyrus, you mentioned when we started the feeling things are getting out of control. They've been getting out of control since the very first bomb fell.
Pape argues that the conflict is creating opportunities for other regional actors to expand their influence. In his view, this is less about one battle and more about a broader shift in the balance of power across the Middle East.
What counts as success?
Correct.
So there's no doubt that that the straits of Hormuz being controlled by Iran is the core issue at the moment, even in some ways bigger than the nuclear program, although I wouldn't take that one completely off the table. But what would success mean? Success would mean, as President Trump is saying, that Hormuz goes back to normal. It is open in a way in which it was before February 27th, February 28th, which means normal commercial traffic going through. Now, maybe it wouldn't have to be 100% normal, 130 ships, but at least somewhere around 100, 50 in, 50 out, that sort of thing on a daily basis. That's what would count as normal. Now, who defines that, by the way? That is not defined by the president of the United States, although he or future she may say something about that. Ultimately, it's defined by commercial shippers. They're the ones who have to take the risk to go through. And right now, there are some ships getting out of Hormuz. It's basically they're escaping prison while the prison guards are shooting at them. Okay, but there's very few coming back in. So there's no prison break to get into Hormuz. There's a prison break to get out of Hormuz. And you can see that it might be risky to take a risk to get out of Hormuz now, but is it going to be any less risky a month from now? You see, so people tracking this by how many, and even the ones getting out are very, very few. So what you are seeing here is that it's the commercial shippers themselves that define victory. Now, is it possible that the United States could physically open Hormuz to bring it back to normal? Well, the operative time frame is actually between now and the midterms. It's not between now and forever. So it's not the military planner and say, just give me carte blanche for 10 years and I'll do this. No, it's between now and the midterms. And why is that? It's because if there is no substantial progress to opening Hormuz by the midterms, then we have every reason to believe the world's economy is going to continue to get worse, and the Democrats will then reap the benefits of this politically. They'll win one or both houses of Congress. And what has been the big Democratic mantra? End this war. And if they do control both houses of Congress, how could they end the war? The same way Congress ended the Vietnam War in 1974. See, most people don't know that the Vietnam War ended. They know that. But it's not because the president decided to end the war. Congress cut off the money in 1974. Now, it took a few more months after that because there was money in the pipeline to fully end the war. However, that's what really ended the war. There was an actual ending here by Congress. And Congress, in Article 1 of the Constitution, controls the purse. It also controls the power to make war. So this is where the real time frame is. Now, between now and the midterms, the odds of, I think, opening Hormuz are infinitesimal, so small as to be zero.
Rather than focusing on political rhetoric, Pape defines success in practical terms. He argues that restoring normal commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, not simply conducting more military operations, is the real measure of whether the strategy has worked.
It's because the Shahed drone, the 136 Shahed drone, which is the prime tool that Iran is using to close Hormuz, is relatively small. It's about the size of a king-size mattress. This is not the size of a giant 747. It's a king-size mattress. It is relatively cheap. It's made with components, a lot like cell phone components right here. And it is has a range of between 500 and 1,200 miles. And I'll just use the shorter range here. What that means with a range of 500 miles is that Shahed drone, again, it's about the size of a king-size mattress. That Shahed drone could be anywhere in a 500-mile by 500-mile drone launch zone along the coast of Iran with Hormuz at the midpoint, and then still hit that ship. So that's 500 miles by 500 miles. That's huge. 1.5 times the size of California.
Wow.
And those, how many Shahed drones does Iran have? Well, they certainly have thousands. There are some counts they have tens of thousands, but they could make many hundreds. These are not that difficult to make. And we would need to shut down the number below something like 200. As my best estimate. Because if they've got 200, that's plenty to do drone swarms and at least do enough of them over a period of weeks to make more drones. Right. So you've got to really shrink that number down. So now that's a two-dimensional scale problem, but it's worse than that, Cyrus, because there's mountains that are huge mountains called the Zagros Mountains in most of that 500 by 500 mile zone. And in those mountains, you can hide those drones, the Shahed drones, pretty much anywhere in the nooks and crevices, and of course under the mountains here. And so, and this is again, it's about the size of the Shahed drone of a king-size mattress, except twice as heavy. It's not 10 times heavier. It's about twice as heavy as a king-size mattress. So you do need a couple guys or a couple people to carry them around, but you don't need trucks to carry them around necessarily. So what that means is that scale problem, remember I said it was 1.5 times the size of California, except it's a three-dimensional problem as well, because those king-size mattresses could be anywhere in those mountains. And they don't have to all be stored nice and neat in one area for us to just get, hit one hit and we knock them all out. Okay, they're likely going to be dispersed here. And so think about it as the mountains are like a skyscraper, like the Empire State Building, except the Zagros Mountains are 10 times the height of the Empire State Building.
Jeez.
And the Empire and those drones, that king size mattress can be in the basement of the Empire State Building. It can be on the ground floor. It can be on the 10th floor. It could be on the 17th floor.
Right.
You get my point. So,
Absolutely.
and so you really have to scour this. And then, do you know how many Empire State Buildings you can fit in that 500 by 500 mile area? 1.6 million.
Jeez.
This is what we're talking about. 11,000 Manhattans. That's our problem. This is why the drone hunt. Now, I can't tell you that this could never be solved, although I'm pretty sure it's probably not. Okay. But it's certainly not going to get solved in the next 3 months. At a minimum, it's a 3 to 6 month mission here. And it may not be solvable at that because it's just the scale is just too big to suppress Iran for the drone suppression that we need. That is the fundamental. I think this is actually, Cyrus, the $64,000 issue that needs to be brought to the public because the public knows things aren't going well, okay? And they sort of have the idea now of geography. We often criticize Americans, they don't know their geography, but I think a lot of Americans know where Iran is roughly, and they know even Hormuz. The scale of what we're talking about to open Hormuz, and you've got all these generals going on talking about how they can do this, including former CENTCOM commanders and other commanders-in-chief, sinks they're called. Okay, yeah, let's see them discuss this in some depth here, as opposed to the one-liner. Let's really get into the operational details here.
This is the interview's most detailed technical explanation. Pape argues that inexpensive drones, difficult terrain, and the scale of the search area create operational challenges that, in his assessment, make achieving military objectives far more difficult than many public discussions suggest. Whether you agree with Professor Robert Pape or not, his central argument is clear. Modern conflicts are shaped not only by military strength, but also by logistics, geography, economics, and political endurance. He believes those factors, not today's headlines, will ultimately determine how this conflict is remembered and what it means for the future of global power.